Right. So, we like to dive into some interesting stuff, and you've sent over something different this time.
Yeah.
A chapter from Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Right.
But it's the Chinese translation,
Yeah, it is.
which honestly I'm kind of intrigued by because I don't think we've ever looked at a translation before, have we?
I think it's the first.
Yeah, this is new, and it's chapter 6. It's called Don't Work for Money.
Yeah.
And knowing Robert Kiyosaki just a little bit, I expect we're in for some unconventional wisdom.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you're in for a treat. He actually opens the chapter with this story about this young journalist that he meets in Singapore, and she's, really frustrated. She wants to be this best-selling author, but she feels stuck in her job, you know.
Okay? I'm already hooked. What's
Yeah.
the big secret? Does he tell her to, just quit her job and go follow her passion? What happens?
He tells her to learn to sell.
Learn to sell.
Yeah.
That's not usually the advice you give to someone who wants to be a writer. I mean, I get it. You got to market your
Mm.
book, but shouldn't the writing be the priority?
And that's where Kiyosaki, kind of challenges that thinking. He says, creativity is important, yes, but it's not enough. You have to be able to connect that to an audience that's willing to pay for it. And he goes into this whole concept of the rich dad versus the poor dad, these two contrasting mindsets toward wealth.
Okay, and I remember those from the book, but can you remind me what those mindsets are?
Yeah, so the rich dad, which represents the lessons that he learned from his mentor, this kind of father figure, emphasizes this broad learning, acquiring a diverse set of skills, particularly in finance, accounting, investing, people management even.
So not just mastering one particular trait or skill, but understanding how it all kind of fits together.
Exactly. And the poor dad, which embodies more of that traditional mindset that his father had, his highly educated but financially struggling father, focuses on specialization. Very much like climbing that corporate ladder within a very specific field.
Mm.
Now, that's not to say that specialization is bad, but Kiyosaki would argue that in today's world, it's often not enough.
It makes you think, because is that really enough now, especially to be so specialized in one thing when the job market's so volatile these days?
That's the question he wants us to ask.
Yeah.
And he goes on to share how he applied this rich dad philosophy in his own life. And sometimes that meant making unconventional choices, like leaving secure, well-paying jobs.
Right. And he left, didn't he work for a shipping company or something?
He did. He graduated from the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy
Oh, wow.
and then went to work for a shipping company. And his poor dad was like horrified.
I can only imagine. Yeah.
But, he saw that as an opportunity to learn about international trade and, understanding that bigger picture,
Yeah.
which goes back to that rich dad philosophy. And then he does it again. He joins the
He
Marines.
does it again.
He joins the Marines. And again, he's not doing it just for the job itself,
Yeah.
but for what he can learn from it. Leadership under pressure, strategic thinking,
Yeah.
the ability to perform under challenging circumstances.
Those are some valuable skills that you can apply no matter what you end up doing. Talk about resilience and adaptability, which I think everyone could use a little bit more of these days.
Well, absolutely. And he emphasizes, every experience, even the tough ones, has valuable lessons that you can apply in different areas. And then he uses this great analogy of a McDonald's hamburger.
Okay, the hamburger analogy I'm interested in.
Right. So he says that, most people can make a decent hamburger, right?
With the right ingredients, yeah.
But McDonald's, they built a system. They figured out how to produce and market and deliver that burger consistently and efficiently on a massive scale. And he says that that's what's missing for a lot of people, including that journalist from the beginning. She has the good burger, she has the writing, but she doesn't have the system.
Yeah, she doesn't have a way to get her burger in the hands of millions of hungry customers, or in her case, readers. But it makes you realize, there's so much more to it than just being good at the thing you do, right?
Yep.
So what would you say are, the key components of this system that he keeps referring to?
Well, he's a huge proponent of sales and marketing. Even if you consider yourself a creative person, understanding that part of it is essential. And he uses this really poignant example of this artist who inherited a bunch of money.
Oh, no. What happened?
So he's able to finally pursue his art full time.
Oh.
But because he had no idea how to market it, how to connect with an audience, he ends up broke
Oh, no.
and right back where he started without a system to kind of sustain that passion.
Yeah.
And I think that that highlights this crucial point that he makes, that you can have the best product, the most innovative ideas, but without that system to kind of bring it to the world and make it sustainable, it's not going to reach its full potential.
That's such a hard lesson to learn, too, especially for creatives, I think, where you're putting your heart and soul into it. And then to think that, the business side is just as important, if not more important sometimes. That's got to be tough. And he actually had to go through that himself, right? He said that he, really struggled with that whole sales side of things.
He did. He talks about how, he actually joined Xerox to get over his fear of sales.
Hmm.
He knew that even with his writing aspirations, if he couldn't sell his ideas, he wouldn't be able to achieve his full potential.
Wow.
So he forced himself to confront that fear head on, and he ended up becoming a top salesman for Xerox.
Wow. Talk about turning a weakness into a strength, right?
Absolutely.
That's incredible.
And that experience ended up being invaluable when he eventually left to start his own company. It's like he knew he had to conquer that fear in order to achieve those ultimate goals.
Yeah, it makes you realize how important it is to be honest with yourself about the things that might be holding you back, even if they're scary, even if they're uncomfortable, because that's usually where like the real growth is going to happen.
Absolutely. It's
Yeah.
about pushing past those comfort zones.
Yeah.
Kiyosaki is a firm believer that that's where the real growth happens outside of those comfortable spaces.
Absolutely. And it's not just about facing your fears either. It's about constantly seeking new knowledge and experiences, right?
Exactly. He really encourages people to view their careers as this continuous learning journey.
Yeah.
Don't just chase the paycheck, he says, but look for the opportunities that are going to teach you valuable skills.
So it's less about climbing that traditional corporate ladder and more about collecting diverse skills and experiences that build on each other.
Exactly. And asking yourself, what can I learn from this experience, even if it means, taking a temporary pay cut or starting from scratch in a new field.
Which is really interesting, especially right now when job security feels like this thing, right?
Exactly.
It's like, how do we make ourselves, I guess, future-proof?
Exactly.
Oh,
And he would say, by focusing on that continuous learning and building this versatile skill set, you're essentially creating your own safety net.
Hmm.
You're making yourself indispensable. You're making yourself adaptable.
Oh, I love that because you're not just building a career, you're building a future where you have options, where you're not afraid of change because you're confident that you can adapt and keep going.
Exactly. It all ties back to that don't work for money
Mm.
philosophy.
Yeah.
It's not about being afraid of hard work. It's about working smarter, not harder.
Yeah.
It's about having your money work for you instead of the other way around.
And there was this other idea from the chapter that I wanted to touch on because it really kind of hit me. And it was this whole thing about how his rich dad believed in giving money away freely.
Right.
Like he truly believed that it would return multiplied.
Yeah.
Whereas his poor dad, held on to his money really, really tightly.
That's one that sparks a lot of debate.
Yeah, it does. It's very interesting. And I don't know, it's just that whole energy of money,
Yeah.
Is it something to be grasped and hoarded, or is it something that flows and multiplies when you're generous with it?
It's a fascinating concept, and it's one that is rooted in a lot of spiritual and philosophical traditions too. This idea that abundance is less about your material possessions and more about a state of mind, this generosity of spirit.
Right. It's that whole, like, the more you give, the more you receive.
Exactly. And whether you subscribe to that belief system or not, you can't deny the psychological impact that giving has. It can shift your mindset from scarcity to abundance, from fear to generosity.
And then that shift in perspective, that belief in abundance can be really powerful when it comes to building wealth.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
When you're operating from a place of abundance, you're more likely to take risks, to invest in yourself and your ideas, to create opportunities rather than just waiting for them to appear.
Totally, because you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. But it's a lot easier said than done to change your whole mindset about money and risk and what it means to be successful. It's a process.
Mm.
It's a process of kind of unlearning those old beliefs and embracing these new possibilities. And it's not always easy. It's not always comfortable. But that's where that real growth happens.
And that's what I love about Kiyosaki's work, because it's like he challenges conventional wisdom. He forces you to question everything you thought you knew about money and success.
He doesn't sugarcoat things.
No, he does not. He's not afraid to step on some toes along the way.
Right.
But that's what makes it so refreshing, because it's not telling you what to think about money. It's about you examining your own beliefs
Yeah.
and deciding what success looks like for you.
And that's such a key point because financial freedom isn't one size fits all. It's about designing a life that aligns with your values, your aspirations, and that might look different for everyone.
Yeah, don't work for money isn't about, lounging around in a hammock all day. It's about the freedom to do what you're passionate about, to have control over your time and your resources. It's about aligning your work with your values and having that financial stability to pursue those goals without being limited by a paycheck.
And it's so interesting how this chapter from the Chinese translation of Rich Dad, Poor Dad,
Yeah,
has resonated with us so strongly. And it's like these principles of financial literacy, continuous learning, building a system for success.
Mhm.
It's universal.
Absolutely. And while those cultural contexts might differ, the fundamental principles of understanding your finances, acquiring valuable skills, and creating that system for success, those are relevant no matter where you are in the world.
This is giving me so much to think about is like a call to action to take control of our financial futures, to not be afraid to, challenge those traditional definitions of success.
Absolutely, to embrace lifelong learning, to
Yeah.
take those calculated risks, and
Aw.
understand that, financial freedom is a journey, not a destination.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Well, it's been a pleasure unpacking all of these ideas with you. And for those of you listening, we'd love to hear your takeaways from this chapter. What resonated with you the most? What actions are you inspired to take until next time? Keep diving deep and keep those questions coming.
It really is. And that experience ended up being so valuable for him later on,
Yeah.
when he finally left to start his own company.
Right.
It's almost like he knew that he had to conquer that fear before he could, achieve those ultimate goals.
It makes you think about like what are we shying away from, and what could that lead to if we actually, face those fears.
It's all about pushing past those comfort zones.
Yeah.
Kiyosaki's a firm believer that that's where the real growth happens, is when you get outside of those comfortable spaces.
And not just facing fears, but constantly learning new things, new experiences.
Exactly. He encourages people to view their careers as this like continuous learning journey.
Okay.
You know, don't chase the paycheck, he says,
Yeah.
but look for those opportunities that are going to teach you valuable skills.
So less about climbing that corporate ladder, more about like collecting skills and experiences that you can then use later.
Exactly. Asking yourself, what can I learn from this experience, even if it means maybe taking a temporary pay cut or even starting from scratch in a new field.
Which is kind of a scary thought, especially now when job security is like this thing.
Right.
How do we make ourselves, I guess, future-proof?
And he would say by focusing on that constant learning, and building this really versatile skill set, you're essentially creating your own safety net.
Right.
You're making yourself indispensable. You're making yourself adaptable.
I love that because it's true. If you can adapt to anything, you're not building a career. You're building a future where you have options and you're not afraid of what's coming next because you can handle it.
Exactly. And it all ties back to that don't work for money philosophy.
Hmm.
It's not about being afraid of hard work. It's about working smarter, not harder.
Right.
Having your money work for you instead of the other way around.
And there's one more thing I wanted to touch on in this chapter because it really stood out to me. And it's this idea that his rich dad believed in giving money away.
Right.
Like truly believed that if he gave it away, it would come back multiplied.
Yeah.
Whereas his poor dad was much more, hold your money tight,
That's a concept that tends to spark some debate.
It really does. And it
Yeah.
made me think about like the energy of money. Is it something to be grasped and hoarded, or is it something that can flow and multiply if you're generous with it?
It's really interesting, isn't it? And it's a very, it's a concept that you see in a lot of spiritual traditions.
Yeah.
This idea that abundance is less about how much you have materially and more about your state of mind.
Right.
This generosity of spirit.
It's that whole, like, the more you give, the more you'll receive.
Exactly. And I mean, whether you subscribe to that belief system or not,
Yeah.
I think you can't deny the psychological impact of giving.
Sure.
It can really shift your mindset from scarcity to abundance,
Totally.
from fear to generosity.
And then just that shift in perspective alone can be really powerful when it comes to finances.
Absolutely. When you're coming from a place of abundance, you're more likely to take risks. You're more likely to invest in yourself and in your ideas.
Yeah.
You're more likely to create opportunities instead of just waiting for them to appear.
Totally. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. But it's a lot easier said than done to just change your whole mindset about money and about risk and what success even means.
It's a process.
Right.
It's a process of unlearning those old beliefs and embracing these new possibilities. And it's not always easy. It's not always comfortable.
Right.
But that's often where the growth happens.
That's what I love about Kiyosaki's work because it does challenge you, like it challenges everything you thought you knew about money and about success.
Yeah, he's not afraid to ruffle some feathers.
And that's what makes his work so compelling. It's not just like, here's the answer. It's like, think about it differently.
Yeah, examine it for yourself what works for you.
And that's a really good point because like financial freedom is not one size fits, all right?
Exactly. It's about you designing a life that
Yeah.
truly aligns with what you value,
Yeah.
what your aspirations are, and that's going to look different for everyone.
Yeah, it's not, don't work for money doesn't mean like sit on a beach and sip margaritas all day. It
Right.
means have the freedom to do what you want when you want.
Exactly. Have control over your time and your resources and not be limited by that paycheck.
And it's so interesting how this chapter, from the Chinese translation of Rich Dad, Poor Dad,
Uh-huh.
resonated with us so much. Like these
Hmm.
are universal themes, financial literacy, continuous learning, building a system.
Absolutely. And I think while those cultural contexts might differ, the basic principles are the same no matter where you are in the world.
It's true. This has really given me a lot to think about. It's a call to action, to take control of our financial futures and to, not be afraid to challenge those traditional definitions of what success should look like.
Absolutely embrace that lifelong learning, take some calculated risks, and remember that financial freedom, it's a journey. It's not a destination.
Beautifully said. Well, it has been such a pleasure unpacking these ideas with you today. And for those of you listening, we want to hear from you. What were your biggest takeaways from this chapter? What resonated with you? What actions are you maybe inspired to take? Until next time, keep diving deep and keep those questions coming.